Hello friends and welcome to sustainableprepping.com, your home for fear-free emergency preparedness on the internet. I'm Brecky and today we're going to be talking about fanaticism. Before we jump in, I just want to say welcome to everybody that is new. I'm so glad you found this slice of the internet, and if you're not new, welcome back. I'm so glad that you are a part of our fear-free emergency preparedness community. Today we're talking about fanaticism, and I think it's a really relevant topic considering the political climate that we are in the United States today. Those of you who don't know me, you probably don't know that I have a background in studying religion, and I'm a religionist. I'm a professor of religion, and I am fascinated by fanatics. I think cults are really fascinating, but I also think mass movements are really fascinating. And it started in a couple of classes I took in undergrad and has been a personal interest of mine for many years. Now, I'm making this video not to instill any kind of fear. I do call this a fear-free emergency preparedness channel, but it may cause anxiety. And so if you're someone who is sensitive to anxiety, this might not be the video for you. So I encourage you to just skip it if you are concerned about your anxiety being triggered. That said, I am convinced that we need to be talking seriously about the role of fanatics and fanaticism in the United States. And just a quick caveat that I want to bring up. I am not biased against the right wing. I just want to say that the FBI has identified very clearly that there are more right-wing white nationalist groups that are using domestic terror threats than there are leftist groups that use domestic terror. Leftist groups tend to be more targeted and they tend to use more cyber terror than they do actual violent terror. So I'm not as concerned with leftist organizations. I am very concerned with right-wing conservative organizations because they will use physical force, whereas leftist groups tend to use cyber attack forces. So I just wanted to make that really clear. That's why I am particularly focusing on the fanatics of the right-wing fringe white nationalist paramilitary groups. We are at risk of right-wing white nationalist fanatical groups using domestic terror as a threat in this country. We have been for years. We've actually seen domestic terror incidents again and again. The Nashville RV bombing on Christmas Day in 2020 is one such example of a domestic terror threat, as was the attack on the Capitol on January 6th of this year. We need to take these threats seriously. They are coordinated, and fanatical groups are often highly organized and highly motivated, and so we need to critically look at fanaticism and fanatical groups in the United States as an element of what we should be preparing for as we make our preparedness plans. It is important for me to go ahead and acknowledge that this shift in feeling secure is something that I, only as a privileged white middle class person, can feel. You ask any minority and they would say that the United States has been unsafe for a long time, particularly if you are Black or Muslim or Jewish in this country. Now, I want to make it really clear that I am not afraid of someone overthrowing the government. I'm not afraid of an actual dictatorial government taking control in the United States. I just don't foresee that happening. I do think we have strong enough democratic institutions. What I am afraid of are these fringe right-wing ultra-conservative groups that have paramilitary training coming in and becoming a terroristic threat because they believe it is their right and their duty to attempt to overthrow our government. And in so fulfilling their patriotic duty, they will use any means necessary, including terrorize their own citizenry. For decades, the FBI has been warning about these fringe white nationalist groups. They have been on FBI warning lists for years, and you can actually go and look at some of these old documents that have been released. This is just a coordinated effort that has basically been fomented by this Trumpist mass movement and the rise of an alternative media narrative that is not based in reality. Think about the guy with the sweatshirt that said that Auschwitz work camp free. I mean, who even prints crap like that, let alone wears it in public to our national, to our nation's capital, a nation that sacrificed lives in order to end the threat of Nazism. This is a serious movement and we need to take it seriously. And the attacks on the Capitol were absolutely intentional and coordinated. There were inside players and actors, and we shouldn't be surprised as more and more of that information is unfolding over the next days and weeks. Fanaticism is characterized by a very clear break from reality. Your truth, the thing that gives you meaning, is not in conjunction or in accord with the reality that the rest of us live in. A lot of my understanding of fanaticism came from a really excellent, if dated, book book called The True Believer: Thoughts on Mass Movements by the philosopher Eric Hoffer. I read this in college and have since reread it a couple of times and read other books on counterterrorism over the course of the last decade. And really, I come back to this idea of fanaticism because a fanatic has to have an illogical break with reality, which means a fanatic cannot be reasoned with. You can't reason someone out of a fanatical belief. This is true for fanatical religious beliefs, fanatical political beliefs, even fanatical fan beliefs, right? When soccer hooligans murder each other after games, that becomes a break with logical reality based on a fanatical adherence to one group identity. Fanaticism also means that you have to cut ties with your old life and you have to basically reject anything that threatens your truth or the purity of your in-group. And we definitely are seeing this with the rise of this ultra-right-wing conservative community. There are already Christian pastors that have supported Trump that are saying they're getting death threats for encouraging people to accept the election. People that are saying horrible things and encouraging acts of violence against Christian pastors who have supported Trump for the last 4 years and are now saying, well, this attack on the Capitol was wrong and also Joe Biden's going to be president. We need to get over it. Like, they're not supporting Biden or his platform, but fanatics can't accept any challenge to their truth. And their truth is that Joe Biden stole the election and the American government therefore is forfeit and should be overthrown. And so they have to break all ties in order to keep purity of thought. This is scary. And we saw this in the Middle East. This is the same rhetoric that was used to encourage suicide bombers, right? This is the same scenario that led to ultra fanatics like Osama bin Laden. So the question that we have to start facing, the deep question we have to ask is, to what degree are these fanatics, these right-wing fanatics, going to go to overthrow what they perceive is a false government? I think we need to plan for more domestic attacks. I think we need to plan for acts of domestic terror in order to prove a point. I do think our democratic institutions are strong enough to withhold these attacks, to withstand them, but I don't think that we're going to get out of the next 3 to 6 months without seeing an increasing level of domestic violence. I think we're going to see more car bombs like what happened in Northern Ireland. I think we might see some domestic shooters or some Waco, Texas style standoffs. And I think we're going to see multi-state coordinated attacks on local capitals because these groups are highly organized and they have been organizing as paramilitary groups for years. And I do believe that the only way we're going to really deal with this sort of internalized insurgency, if you will be to treat them like we did in the Middle East, and that is to cut them off from people that they can influence to becoming fanatics as much as possible, to limit their ability and their reach for recruiting, and to plan as though they're going to resort to the worst kinds of domestic terror and violence. No, I'm not a prophet. I have no way of knowing what choices these far-right fanatics will take. But I do foresee that they're going to take action and that they're probably going to use violent force to further their fanatical beliefs. It's important that we start naming them as domestic terrorists and we start naming this as fanaticism in order to separate it from non-fanatical Republicans and non-fanatical conservatives, because there is a difference. I think it's important too that we can't address an issue if we're not going to talk about it. And we need to talk about the fact that domestic terror is real. It happened on January 6th, and it is very likely going to happen again. So, okay, let's take a deep breath. We know that these fanatical groups are out there. They're probably operating as many cells across the country, and we don't know what their next move is going to be. What can you do? What can you do today to prepare yourself and to add this issue to your list of things for which you are planning and preparing? I think the first thing that you can do is secure your home. Sheltering in place is always the best option. Very rarely is evacuation to a secondary location the wisest choice. Most of us don't have dedicated bug out locations, and there is the risk of never making it to your bug out location, your evacuation location. So sheltering in place is key. How can you make your home secure? This with really focusing on the basics, focusing on water and food and water filtration, then on your medication and first aid, then concentric circles out, having a plan for backup power, backup heating, and backup sanitation. Once you have those bases in place, you can shelter in place until your supplies run out. And that is going to put you far ahead of many others. Now, you should still establish evacuation routes and have them both digitally and in print. This is something that I talk about a lot Just because I don't think evacuation is the best option doesn't mean you shouldn't have it as a part of your plan, but also have a very clear who, what, when, and where. Who are you concerned about, right? And who's coming with you? What are you going to do, right? Where are you going to go? And when are you going to go, right? Have all of those things in place. How are you going to get there? Answer all those questions, know what you're going to do, and have it outlined. Write it down. Make sure everyone in your family or your extended group that's going to be traveling know the plan, know the answer to all those questions, so that you can feel calm that if you have to evacuate, you know the moment, right? You have an agreed upon an intentional threshold for evacuation. You all agree upon it, and then you plan accordingly. My final recommendation is to really focus on skills. Now, you can be anxious and you can follow the news and you can try to understand what's happening with fanatics, but first of all, you are not going to change a fanatic's mind. Focus on things like learning to cook from scratch so that you can use all of your pantry and any supplies that you can come across effectively. Focus on learning first aid, or maybe a communication skill that can be used in the event of a major grid down crisis. You can focus on teaching yourself fire starting. Learn 3 ways to start a fire and put together fire starting kits, or even overland map navigation. You're not going to become a survivalist overnight, and most of us don't want to be a survivalist. But if you're serious about planning for any possible crisis, particularly the very real crisis of fanatics, I encourage you to learn a useful skill. If all of your gear is gone, you only have what's in your head. And if you can have some very useful skills, you'll be able to not just survive, but thrive in the event of a crisis. Friends, I hope I haven't made you too anxious. I'm gonna leave a bunch of links down below, links to some videos that I've made that might be useful, including evacuation and go bag kits and things like that. I'm also going to leave a link to the book, The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. Again, it's an older book, but it is a really good, brief insight into the mind of a true believer and what creates mass movements. And then I'm going to leave a link to our emergency planning guide. I love this guide. I think it's such a great starting point. If you are brand new to emergency preparedness and you are overwhelmed, this is going to help you order your thoughts, get a checklist, figure out the exact steps that you want to take so that you can be confident that all of your prepping is going towards a really specific end. Finally, if you want community, you want to find your people online who are also doing emergency preparedness and they are doing it with as little anxiety as possible. I invite you to join the Sustainable Prepping Insiders group on Facebook. I'm going to leave a link for it for you. We are all about action and taking those steps and moving forward and not doing it because of fear, but doing it out of confidence so that we are going to be confident when the crisis comes, because there's always going to be a crisis that comes. I hope that this has been informative. I'm not here to produce anxiety, but I do want you to be thinking about the role of fanatical groups and fanatics in the United States as you plan your preparations for the coming new year. I hope you guys are all well, and I will see you next week. Bye.